The wind was a living beast, a creature of ice and fury clawing at the timbers of her tiny cabin. For Alara, the blizzard was not just a storm, but a mirror. It was the physical manifestation of the cold that had settled deep in her soul 2 years ago, on the day of her public rejection. The words still echoed in the hollows of her memory, as sharp and cruel as the shards of ice striking her window pane. I, Alpha Riker, reject you, Alara, the half-breed stain on this pack. He had spat the words before the assembled members of the Black Moon Pack, his face a mask of disgust. She was a hybrid, a mistake of nature, born of a wolf father and a human mother who had died in childbirth. Her wolf form was smaller, leaner, a silver shadow instead of the proud timber wolves of her pack. She was an anomaly, a weakness, and Riker had cast her out with righteous zeal. The pack had howled their agreement, their eyes cold and merciless. She was given nothing but the clothes on her back and a command to never return. So she had fled, climbing higher and higher into the Dragon's Tooth Mountains, a place no pack claimed, a place where the winter was eternal and loneliness was a constant companion. Here, in this forgotten corner of the world, her worthlessness was absolute. She was nothing, belonging to no one, not truly wolf, not truly human. The blizzard screamed its agreement. She was drowning in the aftermath, and the storm was the water filling her lungs. A sudden, violent thud against her door ripped her from her bleak thoughts. It was louder than a branch, heavier. Her heart leaped in her throat. No one ever came here. Had Riker changed his mind? Had he sent warriors to finish the job, to erase the stain of her existence completely? Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through her despair. She crept to the door, her hand trembling as she reached for the crude wooden bar that locked it. The wind howled, trying to tear the door from its hinges as she pulled it open, just a crack. At first, she saw nothing but a wall of swirling white. Then, a dark shape against the snow. A body. She pushed the door wider, ignoring the blast of freezing air that stole her breath. Lying half-buried in a fresh drift was a wolf. But it was unlike any wolf she had ever seen. It was enormous, a giant of a creature, its fur the color of a moonless midnight. A dark stain of blood was spreading from its side, melting the snow into a grim crimson slush. Its breath came in shallow, ragged puffs of mist. It was dying. Every instinct screamed at her to slam the door, to bar it and pretend she had seen nothing. A lone wolf this large, this far into the mountains, could only mean trouble. It was likely a rogue, driven mad by solitude, a killer. Yet, as she looked at the magnificent creature, laid low and helpless, something else stirred within her. It was the part of her that was wolf, a primal empathy that saw a fellow creature in its final moments. She could not leave it there. She could not be as cruel as those who had cast her out. With a resolve born of her own deep well of suffering, Alara unbarred the door completely and stepped out into the tempest. The wind tore at her thin clothes, but she ignored it. She grabbed the wolf by the scruff of its thick neck, her muscles straining against the impossible weight. It was like trying to move a boulder. "You are not dying here," she gritted out, her voice lost to the storm. Not today. With agonizing slowness, she dragged the immense beast across the threshold and into the relative warmth of her single-room cabin. She managed to heave the door shut against the raging blizzard, the bar falling into place with a heavy thud that seemed to seal them in together. The wolf lay limp on her floor, a pool of blood already forming on the rough-hewn planks. For a moment, she was paralyzed by the enormity of what she had done. Her meager stores of food and firewood were barely enough for her. How could she care for this giant? But the thought was fleeting. She knelt beside him, her hands hovering over the wound. It was deep, a vicious gash along his ribs. As she gently parted the blood-matted fur, she saw the glint of metal. Silver. Her blood ran cold. These are not the marks of a rival wolf or a bear. These were wounds from a hunter's weapon, specifically designed to kill their kind. Someone had tried to assassinate this wolf. She worked quickly, her fear giving way to a focused urgency. She fetched her cleanest rags and a bowl of precious hot water from the kettle simmering over her small fire. As she began to clean the wound, the wolf let out a low, pained groan. His eyes fluttered open. They were not the yellow or brown of a normal wolf. They were a startling, molten gold, burning with an intelligence that was utterly unnerving. He looked at her, not with the panic of a trapped animal, but with a strange, assessing calm. There was no fear, no aggression. It was as if he was looking straight into her soul, seeing all the cracks and fissures of her broken past. Alara flinched under the intensity of his gaze, but she did not stop her work. "Hold still," she murmured, her voice soft. "I'm not going to hurt you." She managed to pull 3 silver-tipped arrowheads from a gash, her stomach churning at the sight. The wounds were already beginning to fester. She crushed the last of her feverfew and willow bark into a paste, a remedy her father had taught her long ago, and carefully applied it to the injury. The wolf watched her the entire time, his golden eyes never leaving her face. When she was done, she wrapped his torso with strips of an old blanket. Exhausted, she sat back on her heels. The wolf let out a soft sigh, and his head sank back to the floor, his eyes closing. He was still alive. For now. The first day passed in a haze of fear and exhaustion. The wolf's fever raged. He shivered and whimpered in his unconscious state, the sounds tearing at Alara's heart. She spent the hours bathing his head with cool water and forcing sips of broth between his teeth, praying it would be enough. In the dim firelight, she found herself talking to him, her voice a low whisper against the constant scream of the wind. She told him of her rejection, of her loneliness, of the crushing weight of being deemed worthless. She spoke of her dreams of a world where she could belong, where the two halves of her nature were not a curse but a gift. The silent, sleeping wolf was the only audience she had had in 2 years, and the words poured out of her like a river breaking through a dam. On the second day, the blizzard's fury lessened to a mournful sigh, and the wolf's fever broke. When Alara awoke from a brief, fitful sleep on her cot, she found his golden eyes open and fixed on her. He was awake, truly awake. A jolt of fear went through her. He was a wild animal, wounded and cornered. Now that his delirium had passed, he might see her as a threat. She remained perfectly still, her heart hammering against her ribs. He made no move to rise, no sound of aggression. He simply watched her, his gaze filled with that same unnerving intelligence. Cautiously, she slid from her cot and moved to the fire. She prepared a thin stew of salted meat and dried roots, the aroma filling the small cabin. His stomach rumbled, a loud, cavernous sound. She ladled some of the stew into a bowl and, with her heart in her throat, approached him. She set the bowl on the floor, just beyond his reach. "It's not much," she said softly, "but it's all I have." He looked from the bowl to her, then slowly, painstakingly, he dragged his massive body forward and began to eat. He ate with a strange sort of dignity, not the ravenous gulping of a starving animal. When he was finished, he licked the bowl clean and looked at her again, a flicker of something unreadable in his golden eyes. For the rest of the day, a strange, silent companionship settled between them. He did not move from his spot by the fire, but his presence filled the cabin, chasing away the oppressive loneliness that had been her only companion. She no longer felt entirely alone. She felt watched over. It was a bizarre sensation. This wounded beast, who should have been a source of terror, was instead giving her a feeling of safety she had never known. By the third day, the storm had passed completely. Bright, cold sunlight streamed through her window, glinting off the pristine snow. The wolf was immensely better. He was able to stand, albeit with a slight limp, and when she checked his wound, she was stunned to see it was already closing, healing at a rate that was nothing short of miraculous. This was no ordinary wolf. The thought, which had been lurking at the edge of her mind, now took center stage. His size, his intelligence, his incredible healing, everything about him was extraordinary. He seemed to sense her awe. As she finished redressing his wound, he leaned forward and nudged her hand with his nose. The touch was gentle, deliberate. A shock of warmth, of pure energy shot up her arm. It felt like lightning and honey, a current of life that left her breathless. He was thanking her. Tentatively, she reached out and stroked the thick, dark fur of his head. He leaned in her touch, a low, contented rumble vibrating in his chest. It wasn't a growl, it was a purr. Alera's heart ached with a sudden, sharp pang of sorrow. He was almost well. Soon he would be strong enough to leave, to return to whatever world he had come from. And she would be alone again, the silence of the cabin more profound than ever before. The warmth of his presence would be just another ghost in her lonely existence. Just as that thought crossed her mind, a sound cut through the crisp mountain air. A howl, but it wasn't the lonely cry of a single wolf. It was answered by another, and another, a chorus of voices disciplined and powerful. It was a pack. Panic seized her, cold and absolute. Packs never came this high. The only pack that knew of her existence was Black Moon. They had come for her. Riker had sent them to hunt her down like an animal. Her breath hitched, and she scrambled back from the wolf, her eyes wide with terror. The black wolf rose to his full, magnificent height. The movement was fluid, powerful, his limp barely noticeable. A low, menacing growl rumbled deep in his chest, a sound that seemed to shake the very foundations of the cabin. He moved to stand between her and the door, a living shield of midnight fur and barely contained fury. His golden eyes were fixed on the door, his posture one of absolute, lethal protectiveness. Then, a voice boomed from outside, laced with an authority that vibrated through the wood of the door. By order of the Alpha King, open this door. We seek the one who has sheltered our king. Alera froze, the words echoing in the sudden silence of the cabin. King? Her mind reeled. What did they mean? Her terrified gaze flew to the black wolf. He turned his head, his molten gold eyes meeting hers. They were no longer the eyes of an animal. They were filled with regret, with gratitude, and with a profound, earth-shattering power. He took a step toward her, and the air around him began to shimmer, to crackle with an invisible energy. The light in the cabin seemed to bend around his form. Alera watched, speechless, as the magnificent wolf dissolved in a cascade of silver light. Where the beast had stood, there was now a man. He was tall, impossibly so, with broad shoulders and a physique that spoke of centuries of command. His hair was as black as his wolf's fur, falling around a face that was both brutally handsome and regally severe. He was naked, yet he bore no shame, only an aura of absolute, unquestionable authority. And his eyes, they were the same molten gold, burning with an ancient power that made her feel small, insignificant. He was the wolf. He was the king. They're here for me, he said, his voice a deep, resonant rumble that vibrated through her bones. Before she could process his words, the door to her cabin burst inward, splintering off its hinges. A dozen immense warriors, clad in black leather and steel, filled the doorway. They were the largest, most formidable shifters she had ever seen, their eyes glowing with power. The one at the front, a scarred warrior with silver hair, saw the man standing in the center of the room and immediately dropped to one knee. "My king," the warrior breathed, his voice thick with relief. "Kale, you are alive." The other warriors followed suit, a dozen of the most feared shifters on the continent kneeling on the floor of her tiny, dilapidated cabin. But the Alpha King, Kale, did not look at them. His golden eyes were fixed only on her, on Alera, who stood trembling by the hearth, a forgotten rag still clutched in her hand. He closed the distance between them in 2 long strides. He was so close she could feel the heat radiating from his skin. He reached out, his large, calloused hand gently cupping her face. A jolt of pure energy, 1,000 times stronger than when he had nudged her as a wolf, erupted between them. It was a visible spark of silver and gold light, a tangible thing that made the royal guard gasp. The mate bond. Fated. Irrevocable. "You saved me." Kale's voice was low, for her ears only, yet every wolf in the room heard it. "You who they cast out. You, who they called worthless," his thumb stroked her cheek, his touch both a question and a claim. The moon goddess does not make mistakes. For 200 years, I have searched for you. I was ambushed, left for dead by cowards with silver arrows, and destiny itself led me to your door. His gaze intensified, burning away every lie she had ever been told, every cruel word she had ever internalized. You're not a half-breed stain. You are not a mistake. You are my mate, my other half, my Luna Queen. He turned his head slightly, his voice rising to ring with command as he addressed his kneeling guard. This is Alara, my mate, your queen. She is to be shown every honor, every respect. Her word is my word without hesitation. The 12 elite warriors, legends in their own right, bowed their heads lower, their collective allegiance shifting to the stunned, trembling woman before them. Lorcan, the silver-haired second in command, looked up at her, his hard eyes filled with a new, fierce loyalty. My queen, the title, spoken with such reverence, shattered the last of Alara's defenses. A single tear traced a path down her cheek. Kel caught it with his thumb. Your suffering is over, he vowed, his golden eyes blazing with a protective fire. No one will ever harm you again. No one will ever make you feel worthless again. The Black Moon Pack and their pathetic alpha will answer for their crimes against you. They rejected a queen. They will grovel for your forgiveness. He pulled her against his powerful body, wrapping his arms around her as if he would never let go. For the first time in her life, Alara didn't feel like a broken half-breed. She didn't feel like an outcast. She felt cherished. She felt like she was home. In the arms of the Alpha King, her fated mate, she was no longer drowning in a blizzard of despair. She was standing in the dawn of a new life, a life where she was not worthless, but priceless. Alara's journey from rejection to redemption had just begun, a testament to the strength found in kindness and the power of a love destined by the stars. What do you think her first act as queen should be? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more tales of fated love.